into this week's show, I kind of wanted to focus a little bit on Gunther and Cody Rhodes when some news started coming out about Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, TNA. I don't think anyone calls it Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, at least in about 20 years. But today I just happened to be flipping the dials, and Tommy Dreamer was in the middle of an emotional speech on his Busted Open radio show this morning, talking about his departure as one of the creative members of TNA Wrestling. Earlier this week, Tessa Blanchard asked for her release from TNA Wrestling. This follows Steve Macklin leaving TNA, and then just before this recording, it appears that Sami Callihan has left TNA Wrestling. Now, TNA has actually put out a statement saying that part of not just these departures, but just in general from a business sense, they're going to try to start streamlining some of their creative departments to be a little more, I guess, cost friendly. I'll start off with Tessa Blanchard. Rumors are that she's been competing a lot with CMLL. Now, CMLL is one of the companies, not like AAA, that kind of has a little bit of a tie with AAA or with AEW down in Mexico. And rumors are that Tessa Blanchard was kind of asked to slow down on competing so much in CMLL. And, well, long story short, she asked for her release. Now, we don't necessarily know if that's the reason why. But what do you make of Tessa Blanchard, first of all, leaving TNA Wrestling? Now, we all know about her past. We all know about the controversy that goes with her. Could she be somebody that shows up in WWE, AEW, or are we just going to see her floating around outside of TNA?
I think she's going to float outside of TNA. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of baggage there. And I know you mentioned the CMLL and the connection with AEW. I don't think Tony Khan's going to do anything in that area. I think Tony Khan has a certain way he likes to do business. So I don't foresee AEW jumping on that bandwagon and saying, hey, we got to bring her in. If we had to pick between the two major brands, WWE would obviously, I think, would be more, I think they'd be, I don't want to say risk adverse because there's always going to be a risk because of her baggage, but I feel like they might take a chance because maybe they feel maybe she's rehabilitated. AEW could do the same thing, I guess, but I think Tony Khan knows what his fans want, and his fans definitely don't want Tessa Blanchard. If you look at social media, she gets it. I mean, she's a heel in TNA Wrestling, but not necessarily because she's trying to be a heel, but she came back after being injured for a long period of time and rejoined TNA to booze and chants of "you're a racist" over and over again. Here's what I'll say about that, like that whole thing. Mm-hmm. People change and do better after doing something like you just mentioned. Why would someone call her the R word? Because she obviously has done some things that people have obviously felt that are inappropriate, and they are inappropriate. But I also want to mention too that people can be rehabilitated. You can rehabilitate your image. I mean, we've been talking in a different level of Enzo Amore. Obviously he had some issues back in the day, and there was a time where I thought I'd never see Enzo Amore come to WWE, and that seems like it's going to happen. So WWE is more so if they can do business with you and they can see that you've made the right strides, professionally and personally, it can happen. I don't think Tony Khan's going to do it. I can't see it from Tony Khan. He's not the type of person that's going to do that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess my thing is Tessa Blanchard like one of, if not the biggest what if in the world of pro wrestling, right? Because I remember 2020, right? I remember when they put the world title on her in TNA Wrestling.
Yes. We talked about it.
Yes. I mean, they gave her the China treatment. They gave her the main, they made her the face of not just the women's division, the company. They knew their women's division wasn't strong enough and similar like it is in WWE. So she was so big for that division that they had to just make her the face of the company in general. And kind of funny talking about that because one of the people she beat is one of the people that was also recently released. Somebody who, from what I've seen, doesn't have as much TV time, has definitely had more of an upside, also right around the COVID time of 2020. That's Sami Callihan. He's been a workhorse. He's battled a lot of injuries, but he's somebody who's been recently released. Maybe it's probably because of the fact that he's battled a lot of injuries and stuff, but he's been kind of like a TNA mainstay, right? We haven't really thought about him ever going to AEW or WWE because of his time in in TNA specifically and outside of TNA and like the indies. Could we see Sammy Callahan? He's getting a little bit older. Could we see him popping up in another company? And if he did, like, where would he fit in? Where would he fit in like, let's say, AEW or WWE? I don't really see him fitting in WWE at all.
I don't see him fitting into any of it, to be honest with you. I feel like, and he can make a lot of money going to, just doing GCW. Like, I feel like GCW is a brand where I feel like his style is very GCW to me. Like, we've been to GCW shows. Mm-hmm. I feel like Sammy Callahan, and I've watched enough Sammy Callahan to know his style definitely fits what GCW is looking for.
It's very, very Kevin Owens like, hardcore Kevin Owens, really.
Yeah, I would say he's hardcore Kevin Owens, but I don't think he's nearly as good of a worker as Kevin Owens. Because I mean, let's be honest, there ain't that many people on the planet that are as good as workers as Kevin Owens. So I don't want to take that away from Sammy Callahan, but he to me is kind of like a AAA version of AAA, not a baseball version AAA, not AAA,
the Mexican company, yes,
Mexican wrestling company, but like a AAA baseball version, I guess, of a Kevin Owens. He could still, I think he could still go. I just don't see a place for him either in WWE or AEW. I think GCW would be good. And you know what? If he comes locally with GCW, I'd pay to see him.
I will say, some other places that, he made a big debut for himself many years ago back, in the early 2000s for Combat Zone Wrestling, which I don't really think CZW, which I don't really think is a thing anymore out of Philadelphia. But yeah, GCW is a place, but also, I could actually see maybe Tony Khan bringing him on for the Ring of Honor brand. He spent some time in the good Ring of Honor, if you will. I could definitely see him doing that. I know a person I saw over the weekend, Dalton Castle, who's kind of had, I don't want to say the same trajectory as him, but kind of floated around the same companies and has made himself a well-known name in the industry despite not being in AEW or WWE formally, because he's been around the companies like Ring of Honor and TNA. And so I could see Sammy Callahan showing up in there. I find it kind of interesting because his significant other is Jessica Havoc. Jessica Havoc is somebody who's currently employed by TNA and has been employed by TNA for quite a while. She's been on the women's scene for a long time. She's been Knockouts champion a few times and things like that. And you wonder how that kind of affects things. And the reason I kind of bring up the significant other is because it's another release we're talking about, Steve Macklin, right? He's been let go from TNA. His significant others in TNA, Deonna Purrazzo. She's still there for the time being, but he's had himself quite the career. I say Sammy Callahan and him are both similar age. They're both 39 years old. I thought actually they were older than that just because of how long they have been around in the wrestling business. Steve Macklin, was part of the Forgotten Sons stable for a little bit that, gets lost in time. But most of his life has been in TNA and at Impact. He's been in a lot of big main events. He's been a guy who looks the part. I mean, if you've ever seen Steve Macklin, he looks the part, right? I don't know how to best say it than that. 6'1", 227 pounds, a lot of muscle, looks like a military guy. I guess
that's a what if too, by the way, the Forgotten Sons. That's a big what if, because there was a short time where people thought that was going to be a next big faction. And then yeah, out of nowhere, it was gone.
They were called up to SmackDown in 2020 from NXT and then released in 2021.
Yep.
So yeah, you don't really know. I mean, what would it? Yeah, that's one of those other. There's been a few of those, right? We've seen, things that we think are going to be a big deal. The Ascension, obviously, is one of those.
Yeah.
But he was in NXT. He was all right in NXT. He was in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Classic with the Forgotten Sons, going up against the Aleister Blacks and Ricochets of the world. To name a few. Going up against the members of Imperium in that classic as well. So he is somebody who is, definitely been in the ring with everybody. He's been in the ring with The Miz and Morrison back when they were a little bit of a tag team as well. On top of the fact that obviously he's been all over the indies. He's been, I don't want to say he's been in GCW, but he's definitely been Major League Wrestling. That's another one of the companies, right? Major League Wrestling, which, I can find himself. Karrion Kross is there right now. I believe he's the champion of MLW. That's another one of those mainstream companies. And it's actually kind of funny because we were talking around the house about wrestling companies because it's so hard because with the NFL and the NBA and things like that, when it comes to sports, it's easy, as we talk about here, how to really put them into a spot, right? They're professionals, they make a living, but they're not in WWE. And so, like, where are they talent wise? And it's not as clear cut as those other sports I talk about to be able to say, like, I can say, like, Steve Macklin is great. And they're like, well, if he's great, why is he not in WWE? Because that's not how it necessarily works in pro wrestling. WWE isn't the NFL. It is brand wise the NFL of, the top level in wrestling, but that doesn't mean it's the talent wise also. And I kind of said it like this, and how you kind of figure out what the main companies are. AEW and WWE, and I'd even say New Japan, in Japan, are the main three big companies that I can think of in the world of pro wrestling. And where MLW is, or GCW is, or and I'll even say TNA. TNA is up there as well. TNA, AEW, WWE. But where these other companies fit in is that the companies that are the main companies, if you work for one of them, specifically like a TNA, that is your priority. Meaning that MLW is a big company. They travel the world, and I went to an indie show this weekend where Eddie Edwards and Dalton Castle were both on the show. But where they fit in, because Eddie Edwards is not in WWE, right? He's in TNA. Where he fits in is that he is open to working other companies to make additional money because he doesn't work necessarily for the WWE or AEW making those kind of guaranteed monies. But those are his priorities. So like MLW, for example, Karrion Kross is in MLW. That would be, I would say, one of his many, same with Shotzi Blackheart, one of many places he works. But if he was currently like employed by TNA Wrestling, he would not work an MLW show if it went up against a TNA show, right? Eddie Edwards, he works for 1,000 different companies, but you know that he's a TNA talent because TNA matches supersede anything else he does. And he will not get hurt at any other. If he's going to go all out where he might risk injury, it will be for TNA. It will not be for the other company. Same with Dalton Castle. He was at this indie wrestling show, right? He is a Ring of Honor talent. That is where his allegiances lie. That is where he is known, and that is where he puts the most effort. He can work elsewhere because I don't know how much Ring of Honor pays under Tony Khan. But the point is, if he was going to do a spot in which he was going to risk injury, he would do it at Ring of Honor. If Ring of Honor is running a pay-per-view and he's not even on the card, he will be at the Ring of Honor show before he's at the indie show on the card, because those were your allegiances lie. So it's hard to like tell, like, well, GCW, like, is that like GCW for like a Shotzi Blackheart is just another one of the many organizations they work at. But when they work for one of the major companies, they might also work for GCW, but never like with, in competition to the other companies, into their main allegiances. So I guess that's really, these other ones essentially are like part-time jobs to your full-time job, and your full-time job takes priority. Yeah. So like Steve Macklin, I could see him, maybe he shows up in Ring of Honor. I don't necessarily think that that's kind of his style. It's, I guess, kind of a shame because I did like him in TNA Wrestling. But to continue on this TNA story quickly, Tommy Dreamer, as I started at the top here, talked about he's being released. He had a mutual parting of the ways, and he was very teary-eyed. I don't think, obviously, he was in favor of the parting of the ways. It probably has to do with streamlining some money. I don't know if TKO is taking over TNA and doing the WWE thing down there, but Tommy Dreamer, part of creative, he's leaving TNA Wrestling. He's been there for a long time. And some rumors are that they might replace him with Road Dogg. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it'd be an upgrade. No offense to Tommy Dreamer. I really like Tommy Dreamer, but I do think Road Dogg has established himself as a very creative mind, and he's not afraid to speak out either. Like, obviously, he left on his own accord at WWE because he didn't like the direction of things. So I think Road Dogg has a great sense for the business, as does Tommy Dreamer. I don't want to I don't want to negate that by any means. But I think it'll be a slight upgrade. I don't want to say it's a huge upgrade, but it would be a slight upgrade. I think Road Dogg would come in there and hit the ground running. I think he would change things up in a way a way that maybe he wasn't able to do in WWE because maybe that's why he left because he was kind of handcuffed in some ways. So if that really does happen, I will be interested to see what Road Dogg comes up with on the creative side for TNA because he's a very creative guy. He's very, he's been the creative for as long as I can remember. He knows how to do a promo. He knows how the in-ring work, the in-ring side of the business works. He knows the psychology. Like he checks all those boxes. So it's a slight upgrade. I feel bad because I like Tommy Dreamer, but if this is the case, I would call it a minor upgrade.
And, again, there's another person whom I guess they could, Tommy Dreamer specifically, we talk about GCW, right? And I know that, they have their, owner, booker over there, Brett Lauderdale kind of running things. But, Tommy Dreamer, especially because of his ECW past, right? I could see it, like, why not bring him in as a little bit of a veteran mentor to some of these people in some of these other companies like MLW or GCW to be specific, right? He lives in the New York City area, so I know that's obviously where a lot of these major companies are out of the Northeast. So that could be, and he's got the busted open job. He's not like going completely broke here, but I think obviously he wants to stay in the world of wrestling. As we know, wrestling doesn't come with a 401k and a pension like a lot of other government jobs out there. So maybe he'll lead with one of those. I do think it's interesting, these TNA changes right before Slammiversary, their second biggest pay-per-view of the year, if you will, which is next weekend. So kind of weird timing for that, but that's the world of wrestling. We talked about it last week. We'll talk about it again this week. Just when you think you know everything, or everything in wrestling is just kind of even keel, big changes are being made, and TNA shaking things up right before Slammiversary. We'll see how it affects them going forward.